And what's good for your health is good for your sleep, and vice versa. People tend to look at sleep like it's a bedtime disorder, or a challenge with sleep is a bedtime. It's a 24-hour challenge. If you're someone that's listening to this and you have challenges sleeping at least 3 times a week, and it's been going on for longer than 3 months, and it impacts your day, you technically have chronic insomnia. You can't force or control sleep. So just do the thing because it's useful, but not with the expectation of, I'm going to do this and then sleep will come.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sovereign Health Podcast. My name is Andy Schooner, and we're on a mission to inspire radical personal responsibility for both the financial and physical aspects of your health. We get the joy of hosting thought leaders who are reimagining how healthcare is delivered. Excited today, Devin Burke has joined the Sovereign Health Podcast. Devin, thanks for coming.
I'm excited to be here. And you're talking about sleep.
Yeah, we were just talking before we got started here that I slept like dog crap last night. So we'll talk about that. But you said that 40 million Americans sleep like dog crap, and so want to get into that. Want to get into Sleep Science Academy and what you're doing. But I'm just so thankful that you are here. 40 million Americans, like that's more than 10% of the population have trouble sleeping. What is the deal with that?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. It's a pandemic. It was an epidemic, and it's moving towards being a sleepless pandemic. Mm-hmm. And at the root of it, to be honest, based off of all the work and the work that we do at Sleep Science Academy, it's stress. It's stress. So as the world experiences more stress, as people experience more stress, the direct impact of that is either challenges falling asleep or staying asleep. Mm-hmm. And then this becomes a habitual pattern. And then it becomes these hyperarousal loops that happen where the body's at threat, and it's you're thinking about all the things you need to do or you have to do or you should have done. Your body starts releasing cortisol and adrenaline. Next thing you know, you're wide awake. Even if your body is extremely tired, your mind is racing. It's trying to solve problems. And this is what I hear from all of our clients and from people that all across the world that have challenges with their sleep. It's, I'm tired, but my brain doesn't seem to shut off, and it keeps me up.
So if we think about buckets for why we sleep poorly, it's clearly stress is, you started off with that as the primary bucket. Are there any other buckets that we need to think about in terms of causes of sleeplessness?
Yeah, and let me just define when I say stress, I'm not just talking about mental, emotional stress.
Okay.
There's physical stress. So that could come in the form of, eating the wrong diet or having food sensitivities or just not exercising or not taking care of yourself. There's environmental stress. This could come in the form of a toxic relationship. This could come in the form of, real environment where you have, mold or toxins in your physical environment that are stressing your body. So there's a lot of different types of stress, but then, there's other types of sleep challenges that exist besides insomnia, which is the primary one, but there's, sleep apnea. There's a huge portion of the population that have undiagnosed sleep apnea, where they're having stop breathing events throughout the night, which is straining their heart, which of course you're not going to be getting a good sleep quality if you have sleep apnea. And this is due either for a lot of reasons. And I'm not a sleep apnea expert, but I do know quite a bit about it. And one of the main reasons is people are just carrying around extra weight. We're overweight. And so that extra girth around the neck, it creates an issue for breathing. And so that's another huge, huge challenge right now for people as well. It's just, what's good for your health is good for your sleep, and vice versa. People tend to look at sleep like it's a bedtime disorder, or a challenge with sleep is a bedtime. It's a 24-hour challenge. It's not just a nighttime challenge. It's a 24-hour challenge. And that's how we really address it at Sleep Science Academy.
Yeah. So if you think about the sources then of sleep disorders, is that an okay term to use, a sleep disorder? Sleep apnea is a medically diagnosed condition, and that it can be diagnosed within sleep studies, and you can go to your doctor, you can go figure that out, right? Sleep apnea. Then there is another category here, which is environmental stress, environmental
Well, we would
factors
call it,
that impact, or what is kind of the other bucket that we can kind of think about this? Because it does
yeah.
feel like there's a couple different buckets here that we probably need to define up front before we kind of go into, okay, what can we now do about this?
Yeah. So then the other bucket, the primary sleep challenge is insomnia. And there's
Okay,
different
insomnia.
classifications of insomnia. And so let's get really clear on what those classifications are. So there's two types of insomnia. So it's sleep onset insomnia or maintenance insomnia. So
Okay.
people that have trouble either initiating sleep or they wake up in the middle of the night and they have a hard time falling back asleep. And a lot of times people have both of those. And then there's different levels of how severe those two subtypes of insomnia are. There could be acute, transient, or chronic. And so most people don't even realize that they have chronic insomnia, which can be defined as trouble initiating sleep or staying asleep through the night for more than 3 days a week that's impacting your life for longer than 3 months. So essentially, wow, if you're someone that's listening to this and you have challenges sleeping at least 3 times a week and it's been going on for longer than 3 months and it impacts your day, you technically have chronic insomnia. And so most people, when they hear, oh my gosh, like, that sounds scary. That sounds like something that can't be fixed, or I'm gonna have to take medication for that. No, that's not the case whatsoever. But that is the definition of, if you're someone that has, and sometimes it changes. Sometimes people have issues falling asleep. Sometimes they have issues staying asleep. Sometimes they have both. Sometimes it comes in waves. But that's the other bucket. So there's the sleep apnea, which is, primarily it's a physical challenge, right? And then there's insomnia, which primarily in all the research I've done and all the people that I've helped, it's a psychophysiological challenge, meaning it's not just mental, it's also physical, but it's mental, it's both. And most people try to address it on the pure physical level, which is why they don't actually ever figure it out, unfortunately. Because you have to address the mind and the body. You can't separate your mind from your body from your mind. And most people, most of the time, they're just focused on the physiological challenges or barriers that's getting in the way of sleep, and they totally disregard the mental or psychological element.
So we have sleep apnea and insomnia. Those are the kind of decision trees here. How do I know if it's sleep apnea or insomnia?
Yeah.
What are the characteristics of these two that can help me differentiate? Or is this, I have to go to a doctor to figure out which one it is?
Yeah. So going to a doctor is always a good idea if you think you have either one of these conditions, right? First and foremost. So this isn't medical advice. So doing a sleep study, so going into a sleep lab where they're going to hook you up with all the wires, you're probably going to spend the night in the lab. That's kind of like the gold standard for determining if you have sleep apnea. Okay, so if you're having stop breathing events. Now, there are some really innovative tech companies that now do in-home studies where they'll actually send you a device that can accurately track stop breathing events throughout the night. And then based off of how many of those events occur, you would have, either mild, medium, or advanced sleep apnea. And then, depending on how advanced it is, the only option for it is either, depending on why you have it, either there's some dental things you can do, or CPAP, which is essentially the Darth Vader machine that people are non-compliant with, which pushes air into the body to stop those stop breathing events from occurring throughout the night. Now, insomnia, this is where it gets a little challenging because people go to their doctor and they say, well, I'm having trouble sleeping. And the doctor says, well, okay, we can do a sleep lab. You go to a sleep lab. And the person says, okay, we can do a sleep study on you. You don't have sleep apnea, you have insomnia. And so then they go, well, what do I do? And they say, well, go back to your doctor. And the doctor says, well, I can prescribe, Ambien, or I can prescribe Lunesta or clonazepam or trazodone, or, and sometimes people are open to using those medications. A lot of times they're not. And then maybe they go to see a therapist, and the therapist isn't trained in sleep. So then they develop this belief that they're broken and that nothing works when they're going to be on medication the rest of their life, or they're, so this is kind of the pattern that I see happen for people in these two sort of buckets.
So is the symptoms of both of these the same, or is there a way that I know by the symptoms that I have that I probably don't have sleep apnea, or I probably don't have insomnia? What are the symptoms? Because the thing I'm thinking through here is like I sleep incredibly poorly, and so I'm trying to figure out for myself.
Yeah.
Is it apnea or insomnia? What do I look at? Because I don't, man, spending the night in a lab hooked up to stuff just does not sound interesting to me. So if I can rule out apnea and focus on insomnia, that would be my preference. But, what are the symptoms of each? Are they different?
Yeah, they're different. So first and foremost, if you snore, so if you sleep with a bed partner, you can ask them, or you can record, have a snore recorder to see if you snore. If you snore, that's usually a sign that you might have sleep apnea.
Okay.
And then if you're waking up gasping for air, or if you're able to sleep through the entire night, you don't have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, and you wake up and you're just you're still tired, even after getting, enough sleep, like 7.5 to 8 hours, and you're still feeling fatigued, then I would say, okay, it's time to see if you have sleep apnea.
Gotcha.
Now, if you have trouble falling asleep, so it takes you hours to fall asleep, or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're not able to get back to sleep within 15 minutes, you have insomnia.
Yeah.
So,
okay, that's good.
It's really that simple. And so, to be honest, we all wake up multiple times throughout the night because we're going through our sleep cycles. And the first stage of sleep, you're semi-conscious. The challenge is if you become fully conscious and then you're not able to initiate sleep again. Like getting up to use the restroom, not a problem if you're able to fall back asleep. But if you wake up in the middle of the night, you have to use the restroom, and then all of a sudden you're up for an hour or 2 hours or for the rest of the night, and that's happening consistently, okay, now we have a challenge. There's something to really address here and look at.
Cool. And so your Sleep Science Academy focuses primarily on insomnia. Is that accurate?
Only address insomnia,
Okay.
And it's chronic insomnia. So it's people that this has become a habitual pattern where it's affecting their life in a big way. And we address both types, either onset or maintenance insomnia, the same way. So the solution is the same for either type.
Rock on. Okay, so we can take sleep apnea off the table here if we can say, okay, the symptoms of sleep apnea is you feel like you're sleeping through the night, you're still really tired. You are a snorer per your bed partner. I've also heard bed partners like actually hear the person stop breathing, right?
Yes.
Like that is something too.
For sure. Or gasping for air.
Or gasping for air.
Yep.
So if you have any of those things, go see a doctor. You might have sleep apnea. And that makes sense. We can kind of stick that over here for a minute. Now we can focus on insomnia. If you are having trouble going to sleep, if you're waking up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep, this is 3 times a week over a 3-month period. You have insomnia. Let's focus there for the rest of our time. That's awesome. Because the second one is my issue. I mean, I wake up at 2 o'clock, 2:30, something like that. I can almost guarantee you, I can tell you within 15 minutes if I looked at my clock what time I wake up. It's always between 2 and 2:30 without fail. And it feels to me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, you're the sleep expert here, it's that last sleep cycle that I have trouble completing. Meaning, like, I don't know how long a sleep cycle is for somebody who's in their mid-40s, but it feels like that last couple hours of sleep is if I get woken up in that last couple hours, I am done. I might as well just get up and read a book or do something because I can't get back to sleep. And so what would somebody, let's start maybe with people who can't stay asleep like me. What are things that I can do? What are tools that I can use to either, 1, stay asleep, or 2, if I do wake up, not get into that rat race of like, here's 20 things I have to do for the day. I'm never going to get them done. The cortisol level goes up. I can almost feel it. Like, what does somebody like me do when I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, let's start with what not to do.
What not to do? Okay.
Yeah. So first and foremost, Andy, this is a very common challenge that so many people struggle with. First and foremost, and so if you're listening to this and you're like, oh yeah, that's me. It's really interesting to me. A lot of people think that their sleep challenge, what you just described, yours is unique, and I always tell people, you're unique, your sleep challenge is not. So that's a very common pattern that is very solvable. And so starting with not to do. So if you wake up consistently at a certain time and you're not able to initiate sleep, you don't want to stay in your bed. And this is a huge mistake that most people make, is they end up staying in their bed. And now, why would I suggest removing yourself from your bed and bedroom is because we're actually training our mind and body that the bed and bedroom means wake up at 2:00 and start problem solving and start thinking about the things that you need to do, that you have upcoming, whatever it is. You're training your mind body, that that's what you do at 2 a.m. by staying in bed. So if you wake up and you're not able to fall back asleep within, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes, and you don't want to look at the clock, which is another thing not to do, is that most people wake up and they look at the clock. So we don't want to look at the clock. We don't want to look at our phone or our computer, and we don't want to stay in bed. We want to practice something called stimulus control. And that means removing yourself from your bed and bedroom and executing the 2 Ps. The 2 Ps are having a place and a plan. Have a place and a plan. A place that you go to that is relaxing, but not so relaxing that you're going to then train your body that that's the place that you sleep at 2 a.m. This could be a chair. This could be the couch. And then you don't want to have a lot of lights on, and you don't have it should be, keep things dark and dim, and then have a plan. And the plan is to do something depending on how activated you are or how much cortisol and adrenaline's pumping through your body. Because in some cases with our clients, they're like on the verge of panic attacks sometimes in the middle of the night. And so there's different strategies for different levels of activation. But let's say you're not super panicky, but you do feel a little bit of stress, and you're like, okay, I know I'm probably not going to be able to fall back asleep. It's after 15 minutes about, you can kind of feel that out. Okay, I'm going to remove myself from the bedroom. I'm going to go to my place. And your plan could be reading a book. It could be listening to a podcast. It could be stretching. It could be, some breath work, some meditation. Now, here's a critical thing that most people never understand that's so important. You're not doing these things. You're not doing the plan so that you go back to sleep. Because I found that if you think I'm going to do this and then this is going to help me get back to sleep, there's this subtle attachment to I'm going to do this and then I'll sleep. And you can't force or control sleep. So just do the thing because you're doing it just to do it, because it's useful, but not with the expectation of I'm going to do this and then sleep will come. It makes a huge difference, believe it or not. These little subtleties, game changing when people actually get them and implement them consistently. It really does make a huge difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I feel myself getting into a place where I want to just read a book or do something. And if I don't expect that I'm going to go back to sleep, set the expectation I'm not going back to sleep, I tend to get more drowsy and actually go back to sleep if I don't expect, because I'm almost like forcing myself. Come on, Andy, Go back to sleep, go back to sleep, go back to sleep. And that, whatever it goes on my brain, creates more stress. Like, why am I not going back to sleep? Why am I not going back to sleep? And so it's exactly what happens to me, for sure.
And not just you, millions of people. This is a pattern millions of people have.
Sorry, I'm being selfish here. I love these podcasts because I get the opportunity to talk to experts about stuff that I personally deal with. And so, thanks for letting me take the time on this one. But, the other thing too that I find at 2:00 in the morning is I'm in this, I feel like I'm right on the cusp of sleeping and not sleeping, which you have those like super annoying recurring thought patterns that happen. Like, I know I'm sleeping because the thought patterns make no sense, but I'm in like the lightest sleep possible. And I don't know when I'm in that moment to say, you know what, I need to get up and like release myself of that annoying sleep kind of place. Or do I just stay and try to let my body get into it? I feel like the latter never works. I can only use the former. Does that make sense? Do you see that in other people?
Yes, it does. And so kind of going back to your original the statement around like, you feel like it's like that last cycle that kind of this sort of happens. So we have every 90 minutes we go through a sleep cycle, and there's different stages of sleep. And the first two stages of sleep, the first stage of sleep is you're pretty conscious. The second stage of sleep, you're coming in and out of it. And that's light sleep, and it's important. And what I found specifically for people, we work with a lot of high performing entrepreneurs, business owners, lawyers, doctors, you name it. People tend to problem solve during their sleep.
Yes.
So, and this is a very interesting thing, and it can be useful, and it also can be very detrimental. So it can be useful because when you're sleeping and you're dreaming, you actually, and there's a lot of evidence to support this. You're actually able to be more creative and solve problems, big problems that you wouldn't be able to solve when you were, consciously awake. And if you're working all night trying to solve problems, there's no break, there's no rest. And so doing things to retrain your mind that sleep is not a time to problem solve. It's a time to actually just let go and allow problems to solve themselves, then tends to create, again, it's sort of a different relationship while you're sleeping. And it's something that you get to experiment with and learn how to do, or unlearn, because so for people that have challenges with sleep, like yourself, I say, train yourself not to work during the night. And then once you solve your sleep challenge and things, you're sleeping through the night, or if you wake up, you're confident in your body will be able to fall back to sleep. If you want to then sort of use sleep some of the time to come up with new creative ideas and problem solve, great, do it then. But not until you balance the challenge out of waking up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And so we wake up at 2. We're trying to problem solve. That's typically my issue. I'm getting up. I'm getting out of bed. I'm going to my place is the couch. It's not my wife mad at me putting me on the couch. It's typically because I'm woken up at 2:00 in the morning. I'm on the couch, and now I have a plan, which is not being in front of my phone. I'm assuming, right? Like I'm reading a book.
Please no.
No electronics.
That would be the worst thing. I mean, okay. And not just because of the blue light that blunts the melatonin production, just because of the hyperarousal. You're on your phone. What are you going to do? You're going to be on social media. You're going to be in your inbox. Totally. It's like, it's the last thing that, like most people's device, this is so anchored to stress. Like just going in your inbox starts to release cortisol for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just picking up your phone can do the same thing. So again, we don't want to, if you can, limit technology. Now, some people they ask me, hey, can I watch like a funny episode on TV of like Friends or, something that's light and funny? That can work for some people. But I tend to say, hey, if you can, and you're willing to really try this, let go of all the technology in the middle of the night.
So reading a book is a good one. What are the other ones that I can do? What other plans have your customers found to be effective?
Yeah, and this is really personal, but I'll give you some things that people have shared that have been effective for them. And let me just say on the book thing, the type of content that you read, believe it or not, makes a difference.
Yeah.
So if you're going to read business books or things that are going to hyper arouse your brain and get you excited about ideas or about, that's not the stuff you want to read in the middle of the night. You want to read something that's relaxing, maybe poetry, maybe a spiritual book. Whatever spiritual, belief you have, something that's going to be calming to read, or something that's really boring, like some type of story that's sort of dry. That would be the content. Now, some of the other things that people have found to be useful, like I mentioned, one of them is breath work. And we teach a lot of different breath work techniques at Sleep Science Academy because it's so effective in getting the body out of that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, and getting back into the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So just simply doing some diaphragmatic breathing, where you're breathing in through your nose, down deep into the diaphragm, 12 times, that can just activate the parasympathetic nervous system response. And there's a ton of different techniques with breath, but I'm a huge believer in consciously learning how to breathe properly. So that's one. Stretching is a great one. Anything that's going to get you out of your head and into your body. So for some people that's stretching, for some people that's reading, for some people that's making a cup of tea, for some people that's praying, for some people that's meditating. Some people do puzzles. Some people, like knit and like do like little, some people play like music, listen to soft music, or so it really, when it comes to the actual plan itself, I always tell people, you come up with the plan, try it out, and just see how it goes. Because this is all an experiment. And if you view it that way, you're going to figure out a plan and an activity or activities that are most conducive to help your body remember how to sleep.
Man, that's great. Well, I know I totally did this backwards. We probably should have started with how do I fall asleep really well, but given my issues, I trump that. And so let's move to falling asleep. If people have trouble falling asleep, what are some things there that we should be thinking about?
For sure. And so this goes back to my comment earlier about insomnia being a 24-hour challenge, not a nighttime challenge. Because as soon as you wake up, you're setting yourself up for success or for a challenging night of sleep. And I can explain that on many levels. And so let me start just as you wake up. So getting up and getting some sun first thing in the morning, hydrating yourself before you dump some caffeine and activate the cortisol levels that are already highest in the morning. Starting your morning off in a more relaxed state is going to create less stress and less pressure and tension build up throughout the day so that you don't have to release so much of that at night in what we call a bed buffer, which we'll get to in a moment. So one of the strategies we have all our clients do, and it helps every single one of them, is if they're not already doing this, time blocking their schedule and actually scheduling white space, even if it's like 5-10 minutes between meetings or between picking up your kids, where you're actually not problem solving. You're not looking at your phone. You're not doing it. You're literally allowing your nervous system, you're training your nervous system to release the pressure valve. And I like to give the example of, it's like throughout our day, we're like a balloon and tension and pressure are building up. And if we're not letting out air of that balloon, at the end of the day, the balloon is huge and it's about to burst. And it takes so much at the end of the day to release that tension and pressure that build up in the mind body system that now it's really hard to fall asleep. We have to go above and beyond to do things to deactivate that stress, that tension and pressure that has built up. And so doing things throughout the day to release tension and pressure, these micro breaks, makes a massive difference specifically for people that have challenges falling asleep. Also staying asleep, but specifically falling asleep, because most people at the end of the day, when they have challenges falling asleep, it's just because the momentum of the day got carried into the night. There wasn't enough breaks. There wasn't enough time to allow the mind body to do what it knows how to do, which is relax and sleep towards the end of the day.
Sure.
Right. So that's, really simple, basic. Everyone listening to this can absolutely take advantage of that. The next thing is making sure that you have a clean break between your day and your night. And especially now, because a lot of people work from home, people take work home or they're working from home and they don't have a clean break of, okay, this is when I'm going to stop work. And you need to have a few hours to like kind of a clean break of your day so that you're not constantly thinking about work or trying to problem solve. Like there needs to be space where, especially at the end of the day, where you're just being, doing things that you enjoy, being with people that you care about. It's like, so that's a lot of people don't have boundaries. So drawing strong boundaries are like, I don't work past 7 p.m. And then having a clean break so that you really honor that makes a huge difference. As far as
how long does that clean break have to be?
Depends on the person and depends on the job. It depends on, there's a lot of factors it depends on. But if you're a type A type of person, if you get shit done and you're constantly problem solving and you're in a very intellectual job, it might take a little bit more time than somebody that's in a more physical job per se. But everyone is a little bit different, and it really also depends on what your evening looks like. Do you have a bedtime routine that you practice, or are you just eating potato chips and watching the news, right? Yeah. And drinking beer or having a bottle of wine or something, which is honestly what most people do. Is they're on caffeine all day and they're stressed out, and then they get home and they're like, okay, let me down some whiskey or have a nightcap or a couple of glasses of wine, and you flip on Netflix and that's called checking out. And what we teach people at Sleep Science Academy is, no, we need to check in, because if you're checking out, you're just kicking the can down the road. You're not addressing the problem in the moment. Yeah, there's a state shift, but we need to actually address what's going on, and that takes you being present to like change your how you're thinking, what you believe, and your behaviors, so that your body can do what it knows how to do, which is sleep.
Yeah, real quick, we're at kind of that point where we're checking out or checking in, depending on how you look at it. Is there a good amount of time, or what is your recommendation for the time between dinner and going to sleep? I'm assuming that check-in, check-out time is in that kind of time zone. So I'm just wondering, what if you had like the perfect recommendation, what would the time be between dinner and going to bed?
Yeah,
because I'm assuming that has to have an impact on my ability to get to sleep.
100%. What you eat and when you eat. And one of my mentors shared this thing with me. I love it because it's so easy to remember and actually makes a huge difference. It's 3-2-1 sleep. So 3 hours before you want to be asleep, you want to not eat. So you want to go to bed essentially in a fasted state. And there's many reasons why, and I can get into the details of why in a minute. And then 2 hours before bed, you want to stop working, because it takes generally for most people about 2 hours for the mind to kind of just chill out and settle. And then 1 hour before bed, that's when you want to start your sort of bedtime routine, whether that's making a cup of tea, stretching, making love to your bed partner, whether that's, taking a hot bath. My routine is I take a hot shower. I kind of like rinse the day off. I make a cup of tea and I read a book, and then occasionally I'll watch a show. That's kind of like what works for me. So that's kind of 3-2-1. So 3-2-1 sleep, 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour. And that really puts people in a really good space to allow sleep to happen versus trying to force and control it.
That 3-2-1 is great. I love that. That the 3 component where, it's 3 hours of you're in a fasted state. So 3 hours before you eat, or eat before you go to bed. Personally, what I've also found is that what I eat, regardless of whether I'm in a fasted state, still has a bit of an impact, or a lot of an impact, especially of what I drink, right? So can we talk about alcohol and the impact of alcohol on our sleep? Is there enough time to give that alcohol the ability to metabolize before we go to sleep that dampens the impact or relieves the body of that impact? How does alcohol impact sleep?
Great question. And unfortunately, alcohol heats our body up, and our body temperature needs to drop 2 to 3 degrees for sleep to happen. And it also dehydrates us. So here's the thing with alcohol. Like anything, quality makes a difference, and the amount. So it's the dose and the quality. And I've done experiments on myself. And if I have a glass of, low alcohol, organic, biodynamic wine versus like a big glass of like cheap wine, the same amount of wine loaded with sulfites, it actually makes a huge difference on how that affects my body. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to drink the highest quality alcohol that you can get, whether it's wine or it's agave, tequila, whatever it is, quality makes a difference. Now, depending on how you metabolize alcohol, and there's different types of metabolizers. So some people metabolize it fast, some people metabolize it slower, is going to depend really what your cutoff should be. Mm-hmm. And so, the earlier the better, really. And it really is the dose. So if you're drinking, and if you're in the habit of using alcohol to relax you, and which most people are, and let's just be honest, I mean, it is having a nice glass of wine or a glass of tequila or something, it relaxes you. But there are better ways of changing your state than using alcohol. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question, it's the quality, and then how fast you metabolize it really dictates how much time you should have in between alcohol and sleep.
Yeah. Along the same lines, I'm just curious because I do keto. And so my one thing that I really have a trouble with is I still have like this sweet tooth that I need to get rid of. And so I talked to Dr. Ovadia in my first episode of the podcast, and he told me that my keto ice cream is really bad for me and I need to stop doing it. However, I still love it. So I do it once in a while, and it has this alcohol sugar in it, which I have found that sugar alcohol almost impacts me worse than a little something of bourbon. Interestingly, so that sugar alcohol, that flavor of that sugar alcohol that I love actually does worse for my sleep than regular alcohol. And I'm assuming the physiological impact is somewhat the same. Given my liver, I'm assuming it's my liver is breaking down that alcohol just like it would break down the bourbon that I really enjoy drinking. So, it's interesting to me that it's not just alcohol, as in, beer or wine or bourbon or whatever. It's
Right.
other things that I'm eating that impact that, just as much. And that ice cream tends to be closer to when I want to go to sleep. And so it has more of an impact than if I had, a happy hour bourbon, at 4:00 in the afternoon or something.
100%. And I'll be honest, Andy, I'm with you on the sweet tooth thing. That's one of the hardest things, after dinner, or later at night, you get a little hungry and you're like, you crave something sweet. And it's behavior change is challenging, and drawing in, like saying no to the keto ice cream or the nightcap or whatever it is to try to make it a real change. It can be difficult. But it makes a difference. It really does when you and part of this too, I always try to let people know this isn't about the perfect way of doing things. Like, it's about what you do consistently that makes a difference. And if you're consistently having issues with your sleep, then you need to change how you're thinking, what you believe, and your behavior. Yeah. And, so usually you need to change all three. And so it's really a matter of understanding there's no perfection, and it doesn't mean you can't have wine or ice cream or watch your TV shows or whatever. But knowing that you're building these habits either that are going to support you to move towards better sleep, which then creates more energy, more life, more creative ideas, or not, and continue to struggle and feel tired and have that affect your decision-making abilities and your emotional health, which it impacts greatly. So it's really a matter of just making that decision of what's more important, and then finding that balance, whatever that balance is for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to this 3-2-1 because I thought it was a kind of a great format to think about this. We just talked a lot about the 3, the eating. The 2 is stop working. The 1 is like get ready for bed. Make a bedtime routine. Can you talk about like what the bedtime routine, if that's the right word or the right term for it, what are some things that we can do right before we go to bed to help us, 1, get to bed easier, and then 2, sleep through the night better?
Yeah. So anything that's going to help your mind and body shift into relaxation would be something that you'd want to think about doing in that hour leading up to bed. Mm-hmm. So, and again, this is kind of, there's not like hey, do this. This is the right way of doing things. It's kind of feeling into what worked for you. But reading a book, like pretty much the same things that you would do if you woke up in the middle of the night and had an issue going back to sleep, those same things you could essentially do before preparing for sleep. So this could be reading, this could be stretching, this could be meditating, making love to your partner. This could be, anything that's going to help you relax, that's going to help your body get back into that rest and digest is going to be a great thing to do. So and that's going and it's going to change. It depends, maybe you have a real stressful day, you're going to have to do a little extra work to calm the body and mind down. Or, maybe you don't have access to what you normally have access to because you're on the road traveling. So you have to kind of, come up with some other things that would work to help you calm your mind and body down. Maybe. So I always say experiment with this, but anything that's going to relax you or begin to relax you, that's supportive and healthy of sleep would be a great thing to try and see how it impacts.
You made it easy. So it's the things that relax us are the things that we should be doing right before bed and if we wake up. It's just we need to figure out how to get our mind into a relaxing state, and that takes some experimentation.
Exactly.
But regardless, we are not getting in front of electronics for the last hour. We are not getting a lot of electronics right before, or if we wake up in the middle of the night. Our electronics are preferably no-goes in those situations. Does that, do you feel like that applies to, like, my wife and I like to watch, a little show or something like that right before we go to bed. Funny enough, it puts her to bed. Like, she's one of those people that can like make it 7 minutes into a movie and she's like passed out. And so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but what do you, how, a lot of us get into those habits of watching a little TV right before we go to bed. Is that, electronics okay? Or is that preferred that we not do that?
Yeah, this is, again, it kind of comes down to quality of
Mm-hmm.
what you're watching. So, content, whether you're reading it or you're watching it, believe it or not, that makes a big difference. If you're watching something that's going to hyper arouse you, that's going to get you excited or put you in a state of fear,
Okay.
then obviously that's not what you want to do. Now, is that an ideal night routine to have, to be in bed watching a show? It really isn't.
Okay.
There's a lot better ways of preparing the mind and body for sleep than that. Although that can work. And again, it's not around, okay, you can't do this, you can never watch a show. It's maybe you do 1 or 2 nights you watch a show, and then all the other nights you're doing something that's more conducive to quality of sleep. Because
Mm-hmm.
the light from our devices, it does inhibit the amount of melatonin production. And that's really important. Melatonin is a sleep hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're getting light from the TV, and you see I have these blue light blocking glasses on. So there are things that you can do to sort of counterbalance some of the stressors. Like, light is a stress. Artificial light, this LED light that's shining in my face, that's a form of physical stress. So there are things that you can do to sort of offset that. But in an ideal situation, getting in the habit of watching a show in bed is not the only things you should do in bed, Andy. Sleep and sex. You
Yeah.
shouldn't even watch TV, ideally, in bed.
What about read? Can I read in bed?
We
not.
always, preferably not.
Okay.
Unless you don't have a sleep challenge that you're working on actively, I would say the purpose is, and we get our clients, the goal is to not even think about sleep. Like, sleep's not an issue at all. It doesn't matter. Because if you ask somebody that has sleep issues what they do, they'll give you this whole list of all the things that they do usually. And then if you ask somebody that sleeps well, what do you do to sleep? They usually say, I don't do anything. I just go to sleep. So sometimes thinking about it too much can also create, more challenge within the sleeping itself.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we talk a lot about how to get good sleep. And clearly there are symptoms of not getting good sleep, which is sleepiness the next day, right? But are there things that we're not thinking about that are ramifications of not getting good sleep? I've always heard that something, the brain is 2% of our body weight, but takes up 20% of our energy or something like that. And it needs to rest. And so are there other things that our body gets impacted by from not getting enough sleep? And then it's kind of the second component of that is, what is enough sleep?
Yeah. Well, let me start with that, and then we'll answer the first question, because that's an easier one to kind of just. So enough sleep, it depends on the person. It depends on your age, your activity level. Generally speaking, healthy adults, the National Sleep Foundation says between 7 to 8 hours. Now, some people need less. Some people need more. Like, if you're an elite athlete, you're going to need more. Obviously, you're training a couple hours a day. That's your profession. You're going to need more sleep. If you're somebody who works behind a computer, you have an online business or something like that, you're going to need a little bit less sleep than an elite athlete, because your body's not going through that training, right? And as you go throughout your life, your sleep architecture is going to change, right? So that's a natural evolution of what happens. It just, our people as they get older tend to sleep less. Now, you can debate, well, that's because they have more stress or more life events to think about or whatever. Or it's just their sleep architecture naturally just starting to change. So the right amount of sleep is going to be unique to you. But how you know you're getting enough and the right amount is you actually wake up and you feel refreshed. You feel energized. But it's challenging. Energy is one of those things that sometimes people are like, well, if only I could sleep better, then I'd have more energy. And yeah, that's true. And there's so many other factors that impact energy. So it's not really fair to say, sleep, if you're not sleeping, energy is connected directly to sleep, and it is, but there's so many other factors, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that kind of leads into your first question,
Let
which
me
is
stop
like,
you there real quick though. So I have friends who sleep 5 hours a night, and they swear that they're fine on 5 hours a night. I have always heard that if you don't get at least 7, you may feel good that day, but there are longer term consequences of not getting enough sleep. And so, you said 7 to 8. Some people can do a little less. Some people can do a little bit more. I mean, is there a number where you say, listen, you are not getting enough sleep? I don't care how you feel the next day.
yeah,
Where do you draw that line?
yeah. I mean, if you're looking at like the research, like really less than like 6.5 hours consistently for most people, there's like 1% of the population that is genetically able to get less sleep, and they don't have the negative ramifications of
Mm-hmm.
less sleep. But it's such a small percentage of people. They have a like gene that just it's crazy, but they have this thing. Most people wish they had it. So it's less than 6.5 hours consistently. You're going to build up what's called sleep debt, and sleep debt you can't pay off. And so there's two systems in the body that control sleep. One of the systems is called adenosine, or sleep pressure. And adenosine builds up throughout the day. And when you sleep, it gets cleared out of the mind and body, and then it sort of builds up. And that creates the sleepiness, or the hunger or desire for sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people are consistently not getting enough sleep or enough quality sleep, that adenosine carries over into the next day, and it's sort of this growing debt.
Yeah.
And and the truth is, this is the truth, Andy. You can get away with consistently getting less sleep for a short amount of time. It's the truth. And if you don't change your habits after a short amount of time, and a short amount of time could be a couple of weeks, depending on how like fit and how resilient your body is versus your genetics and all the other lifestyle things that you're doing to sort of offset that. But eventually it catches up. So these 5-hour sleepers that are like, I only need 5 hours, I'm good to go. Like, they don't realize that if that's been going on for longer than a couple of weeks, they're operating from a suboptimal level, and they think that it's normal.
Yeah.
And that's
my worry is that we have 20% of the population think that they're the 1% genetic, weirdos, right?
Yeah.
It's like the same thing where it's like 80% of the population think that they're smarter than average. Like,
Yeah.
it's one of those things.
Yeah.
And, the doctors that I've talked to, this is not medical advice. The doctors I've talked to said a lot of times this shows up in your metabolic health panels. Like, your blood pressure goes up, your resting blood sugars are up, your HDL is low, your triglycerides are up. And so, not my non-doctor, thought here is, if people are getting 5 hours of sleep and you think you're that 1%, you better be looking at your metabolic health panel to make sure that those metrics, those markers aren't going nuts. Because if they are,
that is
if they are,
great
then
advice.
sleep might be one of the issues that you really need to be, thinking about.
It's a great point. I'm so happy that you brought that up. And measuring sleep, I think, is also an important thing to talk about, because you can't really improve something that you're not measuring.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a little bit tricky with sleep, because sometimes when people measure their sleep, they're just getting this feedback of, okay, you're sleeping like crap, and they don't know what to do, and it creates more stress. And it's like, all right, I'm not even going to measure it anymore, because everything I try isn't working. That's not useful. But if you want to improve something, and hopefully from, at this point in the conversation, people want to improve their sleep because they understand how important it is. It's important to measure it. And if you want to master something, it becomes even more important. And so, at Sleep Science Academy, we use the Oura Ring. There's a lot of devices out there, like the Whoop strap.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, there's a ton of them out there. And actually, even the Apple Watch has gotten really good with their sleep algorithms. So like, all of these other companies are kind of catching up to the Oura with their algorithms. And but it is useful. It is useful. Now, are they 100% accurate? No.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not ever, we don't ever look at one night of sleep. We're looking at several weeks or months when we work
The
with
trend.
clients.
Yeah.
The trend. And even if it's off, if it's consistently off, it's gonna tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to tell a story of, okay, we're making progress in the right direction, or we're making progress in the wrong direction, or no progress, right? And so we're always looking at the data to tell a story, and it's useful. It's useful.
Mm-hmm.
That feedback helps people continue to make the behavioral change that then continues to help them improve their sleep, because they're getting that feedback, like a blood test. You go and you get a cholesterol test. Okay, high cholesterol, option. You got medication, you got diet, you can do both, you can do one or the other. Let's test again in 6 weeks. You have that tangible sort of feedback to then work with and see. And so I think it is important for people that want to improve this or have sleep challenges, as long as you're getting support, that's the caveat, from a trained professional, tracking and measuring your sleep is essential.
So if I have the Oura Ring, and I do, what are the things, what are kind of like the three main measurements, or if there's more than that, you can tell me, but are there 3 or 4 things that I should be like, okay, here, I know in the morning when I look at my Oura Ring results, if I had a good night's sleep or not?
Yeah, so there's something called sleep efficiency, which is the first metric you want to look at, which is your time in bed actually asleep. And so ideally, you want your sleep efficiency to be over 90%. So if your sleep efficiency is consistently less than 90%, then there's something that you want to, obviously that's telling us, hey, there's something to look at here and change. And one of the strategies that work really well, specifically for people that have maintenance insomnia like yourself, is actually called sleep scheduling or sleep restriction, or sleep consolidation, it's sometimes called, where you actually limit the time you're in bed to increase sleep pressure, that adenosine buildup, to then create more, that the sleep efficiency starts to increase. And this is a strategy that can be effective for certain people when they have the right technique and tools and understanding around how to actually implement it. But sleep efficiency would be one thing to track. Sleep onset latency. So onset latency is how fast you fall asleep. Now, this is an important metric to look at, because for some people, like you mentioned, your wife, they fall asleep like super fast. Sometimes for people that fall asleep that fast, it's actually because you're sleep deprived. It can be a sign that you're not getting enough quality sleep. Not always, but that can be something to explore. Because if you're falling right asleep as your head hits the pillow, then it's like, okay, that's not really normal, to be honest.
Yeah.
So those are the sleep efficiency, sleep latency. And then there's also, there's a ton of metrics you can look at, but HRV is another good one to look at. That's, heart rate variability. And this is kind of like a measurement of stress. So this can kind of, if you consistently have low HRV, it's a sign that your body's under stress. So that can give you a sign to look at. And they call that with the Oura, the readiness score. And then
what does that need to be? What does the readiness score need to be at? What is kind of the measurement there?
Well, it's not just HRV that they're factoring into the readiness score. There's, body temperature. There's a lot of other data that they're pulling into their algorithm to give you that sort of readiness score.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what the algorithm is, to be honest.
Okay.
I know HRV is a huge component of the algorithm, but the quality of sleep. So in the Oura Ring, we'll talk about, deep sleep, light sleep, REM sleep. And ideally, you want to get 20% of your total sleep time to be deep sleep and REM sleep. It's going to vary night to night. It's going to vary depending on the person. But generally speaking, you want about 20 to 25% of your total sleep time, which is something also to look at, to be in those deeper stages of sleep.
Okay. Those are good. Those are great. What, so a couple other things that I'm thinking about as we kind of wrap up our time, but are there tools that we can use to help us get better sleep? So, a couple, and I'm thinking like things that are super non-tech, like, taking our thermostat and, putting it down a couple degrees, that to all the way to these beds that, cool you down and are, ridiculously expensive. Are there tools that we can actually, and somewhere in between, which is like taking a pill, whether it be Ambien or melatonin or something like that. So what of those do you feel like are impactful, if at all, or counter impactful, or things we shouldn't be doing?
Yeah, I love this question. So let's kind of start with temperature, because temperature is one of those big factors that control quality of sleep specifically. And you do see these, the Sleep 8 Pod Pro mattress and bed, and you see the bed jet, and you see the chili pad and the Ooler, and there's a lot of devices out that now all the mattresses have cooling technology in them. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because it is true that like I said earlier in this conversation, your body temperature needs to drop 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit for sleep to happen. And then, deeper stages of sleep generally happen when your body temperature is dropping through the night. So a couple free ways to do that, as you mentioned, one of them is actually to drop your thermostat to 68 degrees, which is pretty cold for most people. That can help your body kind of drop. You could wear wool socks, believe it or not. What this does is it draws blood from your core to your extremities. You could take a hot shower, and people are like, well, how doesn't that raise your body temperature? Well, it does initially, but then what happens is there's a cooling effect, and it's all about your core, the center of your body dropping in body temperature. So taking a hot bath or a hot shower is actually going to drop your core body temperature, believe it or not.
I've heard saunas right before you go to bed too is something that's super helpful that people have found. Yeah, for
sure. It absolutely can be. And saunas also help you get into the parasympathetic as well. Mm-hmm. Even though it's kind of a sympathetic activity, because your heart rate's going to start increase because it's a stressor. It can help you then shift into that parasympathetic after.
Yeah.
But we got to be careful with the timing on saunas, because if you're too close to bedtime, then you might still be hot. Okay. And then, so there is a timing factor there. So that's definitely something. So there's a lot of levers to pull with temperature. Mm-hmm. there. There's just a couple that I mentioned. As far as the actual tech, I mean, it just depends on how far you want to take this and how much money you're willing to spend. I've heard great things. Certain people are more of have a warmer body temperature, and having something like a chili pad or a Sleep 8 Pod Pro or something like that to support your sort of composition that tends to be warmer can be helpful. Is it necessary? It's not. Can it help? Yeah, it can.
Good. And the other thing is drugs.
Drugs.
Yeah. How do you feel about drugs?
What drugs are we talking about? Just to be clear.
Yeah. So anything in pill, well, let's not say drugs, anything in pill format that I will take to help me sleep better. And I think it's melatonin, which naturally produced, but also you can get them in, a pill form, to, Ambien on the other side, which is, knock you on your head for, 8 hours, right? Like, is any of those beneficial to us to take on even a short-term basis, or even like on a long-term recurring basis?
Great question. So let's start with the actual prescription medications. And again, disclaimer, not a doctor. This is not medical advice. Prescription medication, depending on what you take, they're bandaids. There's a time and a place to take prescription medication. They are never meant to be long-term solutions to sleep issues. Unfortunately, what doctors don't know how to address sleep issues. And I know this because we have a lot of them in our program that have sleep issues themselves. And so what they're going to do is they're going to continue to prescribe these medications because people are demanding them. Hey, I need to sleep. I need my Ambien. Not the solution. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, a lot of these medications, they have strong side effects, and they're habit forming. And they're a real challenge to come off of, depending on which medication it is, because a lot of them deplete the GABA system in the brain. And I'm going to share with you a supplement that actually works really well for rebuilding the GABA system and helps with sleep in just a moment. So stay tuned here. And all that saying, there is a time and a place for certain medications, for sure, with the mindset that they're temporary and that you're addressing the underlying root cause, which in most people is these hyperarousal loops that we've been talking about. Okay?
Yeah. That makes
When
tons
it
of
comes
sense.
to supplementation, melatonin is obviously the gold. Everyone knows melatonin when it comes to sleep because it's in everything, every sleep supplement. Unfortunately, the meta-analysis, which is the studies of all of the studies about melatonin related to sleep and improvement of sleep, show that melatonin actually doesn't help improve sleep quality or onset. It doesn't help improve sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It can help. Melatonin is more like a timing. It can help with jet lag. It can help you get your timing of sleep, but it's not going to help the quality of sleep, and it's not going to help you fall asleep faster or stay asleep longer. It's not. And the studies show that. And if you're taking melatonin and you're like, well, no, like I take it and it definitely makes me tired and it helps me sleep, chances are it's more of a placebo than anything.
That's what I was going to say. It feels to me, I took melatonin for a while and it felt more like, as I'm doing the research on it, it was probably more of a placebo than it was actually helping me, get to sleep or stay asleep. The other thing too I heard about melatonin is the melatonin that you're taking, and I don't remember what I was taking. I don't know if it was 5 milligrams or 10 or what it was, but it's like 20 or 30 or 40 times what your body naturally produces, which can't be good if I'm, putting 20 or 30x what my body is used to into my body on a daily basis. I mean,
here's the thing, like depending on who you talk to, melatonin can be an amazing antioxidant.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a hormone. So your body, it's a hormone. It actually used to be, I don't know if it still is, it used to be regulated in the EU. Like you couldn't get melatonin without a prescription, which is interesting. But there was other studies on melatonin supplement companies that showed even the same company, what they had on the bottle was way off, like by like 400 times. Like it might've said 5 milligrams on the bottle. And then when they tested it, it had like 400 times more strength than what was on the bottle. So it's not. So again, supplements. Unfortunately, supplements are not regulated, or fortunately, I'm not sure, depending on how you look at it. But the dose of what you're actually getting can greatly vary. But again, melatonin, it can be used as an antioxidant, and it can be used to help heal certain diseases. But when it comes to sleep, it's not. Studies show it's not the solution.
The other thing that I used, and I'm telling the audience this because it's a learning. I was looking for what it was called because I forgot exactly what it was, but it was diphenhydramine, which is in sleep aids. So if you go, you could say, look at liquid sleep aid, and diphenhydramine is the primary ingredient in this. And, I took that for probably a year. I think you're only supposed to take it for like 2 weeks.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I had not just brain fog, but what felt to me like a form of dementia. I mean, it messed up my brain so bad that I was forgetting things. My wife was like, what is going on with you? Like, I think people need to be very, very careful not to medicate the symptoms away, but trying to figure out what is the core root of what's going on here and address it there. And so, the only reason I wanted to talk about drugs is because everybody wants to say, oh, well, I'm just going to go do a drug. And I think what I would, again, this is a non-doctor's opinion. What I would like to say is you're just masking something that's probably bigger, that's not going to probably go away. Again, I'm saying probably because I'm not a doctor. I don't want people to think that I'm giving them medical advice, but it's probably not going to go away by taking, medications to help you sleep.
They're bandaids. And again, there's a time and a place. If you're taking them for 2 weeks just to kind of get your footing and your foundation because you're having that bad of a sleep issue. But beyond that, I think you really need to address the root cause. You really need to, the solution is never in a pill.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. The solution is never in a pill. And we are conditioned to look for quick fixes. It's called being human, and it's called big pharma marketing. Mm-hmm. And so if it was that easy, it's not that easy, unfortunately. I wish it was that easy, But what I found, which is really interesting, is people that have insomnia or sleep issues, all it really means is there's something that you get to learn. There's something in your life, in your mind, your body, and your behaviors, and your thoughts, your beliefs that's out of balance. And what we found is when we work with people and really help them address the underlying root causes, they get to a place where they actually see it as, wow, I thought this was a curse. They actually get to see it as, wow, this is a gift. This is like this, I would never have done this type of work to really uncover what was keeping my body from doing what it knows how to do, which is sleep, which is the most natural thing in the world. And that's really a point of transformation when we see our clients get to that place where they're like actually grateful for having this sleep challenge, because they never would have realized what they realized from doing the inner work in how they're thinking and behaving. Yeah. And it's amazing. I mean, we have incredible testimonials, over 100 of them on our website, of people that for 30 years were on all different types of medication. They were losing their memory. Their life was falling apart. And they were able to turn it around. Yeah. And then it's amazing. So no matter how long you've been struggling with your sleep, there's a solution for you, but you have to be willing to do the work. The solution is not in a pill.
Man, I love that. So to summarize, it feels like good sleep actually starts when you wake up.
Yes.
Give yourself some sunlight, a hydration before you jump into the caffeine. Give yourself some periods during the day where you're not problem solving, you're relaxing, you're breathing, you're stretching, you're praying, you're doing something that is not problem solving, work related, so that balloon doesn't get too big. 3, 2, 1 before you go to bed. 3 hours of eating, 2 hours. Don't stop 3 hours before you go to bed eating. 2 hours before you go to bed working. And then 1 hour before you go to bed is start a sleep routine. Sounds like experimentation, preferably not getting in front of electronics. And then when you get into bed, you are sleeping or you're making love to your partner. Those should be the two things that you're doing in bed. If you get up in the middle of the night, get up, get out of bed so you don't have your mind attached to sleeplessness while in bed. Do something relaxing, get your mind in the right place. Again, praying, reading, something boring, preferably, stretching, breathing 12 times, deep inhales. That's hopefully in the last 60 seconds was a pretty good summary of what we talked about. And if we want more than that, how do we find you? I know this is your expertise. So where can our listeners find you, whether it be social media or the web, if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so sleepscienceacademy.com. And then on all the social channels, it's either Sleep Science Academy or Devin Burke Wellness. But I have a lot of incredible content on YouTube that dives into a lot of different techniques and things that we've talked about on this podcast in a much deeper way. So that would be a great place for people that want more information. They can go to the YouTube channel, or if you want more support, then go to the website, and we'd love to have a free consultation with you to see if we might be able to help.
Awesome. Devin, I hope I sleep better tonight after this. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted.
Keep me posted. And I'll tell you this, it sometimes it takes time. So if it doesn't happen tonight, don't just throw everything out the window. It can take time to really break some old patterns and habits. But what you now know, your chances of success are much, much higher. Let's just put it that way.
Low time preference approach to sleep. I love it. Devin Burke, appreciate the time.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate you, man.
Yep. Bye-bye.